The conference room was so bright it felt surgical, every flaw in my face reflected in the glass walls as my father said the words that sliced straight through me. "You're suspended until you apologize to your sister." Madison lifted her chin, pretending to be wounded, but the tiny smirk she couldn't hide told the truth. People stared at the table at their shoes anywhere but at me. No one spoke. No one defended me. They thought this was the end of my silence. But what they didn't know was, before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family, because sometimes the people who share our blood are the ones who cut the deepest. If any part of my story feels familiar, stay with me. What happened next didn't just change my career. It exposed everything my family worked their whole lives to hide. I didn't understand favoritism when I was a kid. It didn't arrive like a storm. It crept in quietly, settling into the corners of our house until it felt like part of the furniture. One of my earliest memories is sitting at our old oak dinner table, legs swinging above the floor, while Mom plated roasted chicken. She placed the biggest piece on Madison's plate without hesitation. Mine came second. Dad didn't blink. Madison smirked like she'd earned something. I told myself it was nothing, just dinner. I was wrong. Patterns always start small. The 7th grade science fair burned that truth into me. The gym reeked of glue sticks and overheated lights. Madison forgot half her materials at home and melted into tears, loud and dramatic. Teachers rushed. Dad rushed. Everyone rushed. Me. I stood there with my finished project while he scolded me. "Why didn't you help your sister?" My face burned as kids whispered behind their display boards. That day I learned responsibility didn't trickle down in our family. It fell squarely on me. Holidays sealed the hierarchy. That Christmas snow covered everything, muting the whole neighborhood. Inside, Madison unwrapped a personalized tablet. Her name engraved. Pink case. I opened a planner. Beige. Dad smiled like he'd nailed the perfect gift. "You're the organized one." Cinnamon scented the air, but all I felt was something tighten just beneath my ribs. I swallowed it. I always did. By high school, the hierarchy became routine, quiet, constant. When I won a statewide academic award, I walked into a living room with no decorations, no excitement, no mention of it. Madison was outside taking pictures for Instagram, Mom fussing over her angles. My certificate sat on a coffee table under catalogs and bills. "Show us later?" Dad called while grabbing keys to take Madison to rehearsal. I told myself it didn't matter, but the sting lingered longer than I admitted. Then came the acceptance letter. The envelope was thick, the kind that makes your pulse jump. I opened it alone in the kitchen. I remember the morning light pouring across the tiles, warm and soft, the kind of moment I always hoped someone would share with me. Dad skimmed the letter, nodded, and placed it with the rest of the mail. "Good job. Flat. Distant. Done." 10 minutes later, Madison burst in wearing an engagement ring the size of a marble. Champagne popped. Relatives FaceTimed. My letter vanished under party napkins like it had never existed. Mom had died 6 months earlier, and without her, the house lost its warmth and its balance. She was the only one who ever looked at me long enough to see when I was carrying too much. Before she passed, she handed me a small notebook with 3 faded words on the cover: "Keep the receipts." At the time, I assumed she meant work tasks, to-do lists. I didn't know she meant everything, every moment I'd need later. When I started at Reed Tech as an intern, grief and determination were the only things keeping me upright. People smiled politely, calling me the boss's older daughter with the tone that implied I was simply passing through. Madison glowed at every company event. I worked in a windowless room on the 12th floor with flickering lights and mismatched chairs, but I built something there slowly, stubbornly. A team. A structure. A system no one paid attention to unless it broke. Late one night at 23, after saving a project that should have crashed the company, I stepped onto the 26th floor balcony. The city spread out beneath me like broken glass and cold stars. My breath fogged the air. My fingers were numb. And for the first time in my life, I let myself whisper a truth I had never dared to say out loud. One day, I won't stay. I didn't know how close that day really was. Reed Tech grew fast, and so did Madison's spotlight. She was the glitter, the noise, the one clients remembered. I was the one fixing everything quietly in the background. At first, I told myself it was balance, but balance implies choice. This was expectation. The Marlowe project proved it. Madison promised a 2-month delivery on a 6-month build, no consultation, no warning. Jordan came to me that night, dark circles under his eyes, whispering, "We're going to lose them." We didn't sleep for days, just coffee, cold pizza, and the soft hum of code compiling at 3 a.m. We delivered the impossible. At the all-hands meeting, Madison got the applause. "Client relations at its finest," Dad said. Jordan glanced at me. I smiled back because what else was I supposed to do? By 26, the cracks weren't cracks anymore. They were fault lines. Mom's notebook. Keep the receipts became less of a reminder and more of a lifeline. I started logging things that weren't work. The joke Madison made at a lunch that painted me as careless, Dad believing it instantly. The partners who assumed Madison led the technical team because she said it with confidence. The way every mistake seemed to have my name penciled into the margins before anyone even checked. But the moment things shifted from unfair to dangerous happened during a family lunch downtown. Madison told a story about a difficult client, then casually added, "Avery messed up the timeline again, but I fixed it." She said it with a laugh, too light, too smooth. Dad frowned at me, not her. You need to be more careful. I froze mid-bite. I didn't mess up anything. Madison just waved her hand. Relax, it's a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was rehearsal. Zoe revealed the next layer. We were on her balcony under string lights, blankets around our shoulders. She looked almost afraid to say it. Madison told people at that rooftop party that you'll always clean up her messes, and that your dad will never believe you over her. Ever. For once, I didn't feel shock. I felt confirmation. Someone had finally said out loud what I had always felt pressed against my ribs. Jordan delivered the final straw. He showed up at my office one evening with a laptop in hand, jaw tight. You need to see this. In a hidden server folder one I didn't create sat 2 versions of our latest project timeline, mine and Madison's altered version. Numbers twisted, deadlines shifted, every line rewritten to match whatever she promised clients. She hid this, Jordan said quietly. And if it breaks, she told leadership you approved it. Something cold settled behind my sternum. Not anger, clarity. I realized I had spent years giving them the benefit of the doubt. I thought the favoritism was unintentional, the mistakes misunderstandings, the miscommunications fixable. They weren't. They were tactics. That night I walked onto the 26th floor balcony again. The air was colder than I remembered, sharp enough to sting. The city lights blinked below like warnings I should have listened to years ago. I didn't whisper anything this time. I just stood there, breathing steady, understanding fully for the first time. A breaking point wasn't coming. It had already arrived. The unraveling didn't start with an explosion. It began with a quiet shift, small things that didn't feel small once you put them together. The first was the Monday meeting on the 26th floor. Madison breezed in, late latte in hand, confidence trailing behind her like perfume. I had already prepared a realistic 3-month plan for the new startup partnership. But before I could speak, she slid her glossy folder across the table. I promised them 4 weeks, she said brightly. They loved it. The room stiffened. I felt every pair of eyes flick between us, waiting. 4 weeks isn't possible, I said. Madison didn't look up. Not with your mindset. Dad sighed, exasperated, disappointed, predictable. Avery, just make it work. That sentence landed like a verdict. They weren't asking for feasibility, they were asking for obedience. 2 days later, Jordan appeared at my doorway. He didn't knock. He just held up a document, his hands trembling slightly. She made the juniors sign this. The timeline numbers were wrong, dangerously wrong. 3 terrified signatures sat at the bottom. She cornered them in a conference room, Jordan said. Told them you'd fix the rest. My stomach dropped. Did they understand what they were signing? No, he whispered. They were scared. I didn't yell. I didn't storm anywhere. I walked straight to Madison. She was scrolling her phone near the elevators, humming. You can't pressure the team into signing false data, I said. She smiled like she was humoring a child. Relax. The client's happy. You'll adjust things. You always do. The elevator dinged behind her. Someone held the door, eyes wide, hoping I wouldn't drag them into this. Madison stepped inside, threw me a sugary smile and said, You make everything harder than it needs to be. The doors closed. My jaw tightened. But it was the email incident that shifted everything from dangerous to hostile. It arrived at 3:17 a.m., sent from my account. Cruel, dismissive, blaming another department for delays that weren't real. I reread it 4 times, heart hammering. I was asleep at 3:17. I had logs, messages, proof. But none of that mattered when a lie traveled faster. Jordan rushed to my desk 30 minutes later. They think you wrote it. I didn't. His voice dropped. I know, but someone wants it to look like you did. Someone. We both knew who. I took the email to Dad anyway. I shouldn't have. Avery, we don't have time for blame games, he said, massaging his temples. I apologize to the partner team on your behalf. On my behalf. My voice cracked. You didn't ask me if He cut me off. Why would Madison lie about something so small? I stared at him, breath shaking. I wasn't talking about Madison. Enough, he snapped. Fix it. Not investigate, not question, not support, just fix it. That night the office emptied around me, lights dimming, chairs pushed in silence replacing chatter. I opened Mom's notebook. Fake email, forced signatures, lies spreading faster than facts. The words looked different when written down, more permanent, more dangerous. But the real blow came that Friday morning. I stepped off the elevator and froze. A memo was taped beside the door's new project structure. At the top of the product development column was Madison's name. My name wasn't anywhere, not reassigned, not relocated, just gone. Someone walking by muttered, didn't know they were replacing her. I peeled the memo off the wall, hands cold. Dad barely glanced up when I confronted him. It's a mistake, he said, a mistake that prints itself and posts itself on walls. The assistant uploaded the wrong version, then why is Madison listed with my title? He stiffened. She's helping lead the initiative, so I'm out. Silence. Thick, damning, not a misunderstanding, a move. And suddenly the building felt colder than ever. The following week felt like walking through a building that no longer recognized me. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. People avoided my eyes like the truth might spill out if we made contact. On Tuesday, as I approached the engineering wing, I heard murmurs behind a half-closed conference door. Is she really being pushed out? Madison's been acting like she already owns that floor. The hinges creaked as I nudged the door. Silence snapped into place. Jordan looked at me, the kind of look people give right before telling you something you already fear. Avery, he said quietly, You should see this. He handed me a tablet. My name was all over the logs, approval signatures, edits. None of them were mine. These were routed through your account, he said. But the authentication keys don't match your device. He paused, voice lower. She told the client yesterday that you approved the compressed timeline. I felt the room tilt. I wasn't even here yesterday. I know, he said. That's why I checked the logs. Sick heat rose up my throat. Someone wasn't just undermining me anymore. Someone was building a case. And that someone had access. Later that afternoon, I went down to the coffee shop across the street needing air, caffeine, or maybe just a moment where I didn't feel like I was being watched. The place smelled like burnt espresso and warm sugar. That's when I heard her. Madison. Laughing. She sat with a client near the back, voice dripping sweetness. I love my sister, she said, but she's hopeless with deadlines. Brilliant but slow. So I step in. The client chuckled. My paper cup buckled slightly in my hand. She leaned forward conspiratorially. Honestly, Dad would be lost without me. The espresso machine whirred, drowning out the client's answer, but Madison's smile finished the sentence for him. I left before my anger showed on my face. That night at home, I sat with Cooper curled against my leg. Zoe called, worry threading her voice before she even spoke. Ave, I need to tell you something. I closed my eyes. Go ahead. She hesitated, a long, heavy pause. I overheard Madison at that rooftop party last month. She told a guy she's basically running ReadTech now. And then she said, another pause. She said you'll always clean up her messes, and that your dad will never believe you over her. Ever. For a second I didn't breathe. Not because the words hurt, because they confirmed everything I had pushed aside for years. The next morning, the final blow landed. As I stepped onto my floor, my team was gathered around the big screen. A new project timeline glowed bright red and green, deadlines stacked like dominoes ready to fall. At the top, updated by M. Reed, directly beneath, approved by A. Reed, a lie, a trap. Jordan met my eyes. We told her this wasn't doable, he said. She said you'd sign off and take the heat. I stared at the forged approval, my initials printed next to dates that would destroy the department. Madison emerged from behind the group hair, perfect smile, effortless. Oh good, she said lightly. You're here. We have a client call in 20. You'll back me up, right? I didn't answer. She blinked innocently, like she hadn't spent weeks burying landmines in my path. Then Dad's voice cut through the room from behind us. Avery, don't make a scene. This is about optics. Optics. Not truth. Not fairness. Just the facade they'd always protected. Something in me snapped, not loudly, not violently. Quietly. Cleanly. A thread pulled free from years of restraint. I thought of Mom's notebook, of all the receipts she told me to keep, of every lie stacked neatly beside my name. And for the first time in my life, I knew with absolute certainty I wasn't afraid of leaving. I was afraid of what staying would turn me into. That certainty followed me into the meeting I never should have attended. The one where everything changed. The emergency meeting was set for 9 a.m., but when I stepped onto the 26th floor, the atmosphere was already thick, like the building itself knew something irreversible was coming. The hallway lights were harsh cold, exposing every tense shift of the people waiting outside the conference room. Inside, the air went still. Dad stood at the head of the long glass table, jaw-tight, suit immaculate, trying to look in control. Helen Grant, the external legal advisor, sat beside him with her laptop open, gaze sharp and unreadable. A paralegal typed quietly in the corner. Madison hovered near the window, arms crossed, eyes darting between me and Dad, searching for her advantage. I didn't rush. I walked to my seat, placed my leather portfolio on the glass, and let it land with a clean final sound. A sound that made Madison flinch. A sound Dad pretended not to hear. Avery, he began, voice strained, we can resolve this. But you have to be reasonable. I sat back. I am being reasonable. Helen leaned forward slightly. We'd like to understand your intentions. I opened the portfolio and slid a single sheet across the table. My resignation. The room fractured into silence. Helen's inhale was sharp. The paralegal's fingers froze. Madison's eyes widened, then narrowed as if calculating the damage to her performance. Dad shook his head. No, Avery. This is unnecessary. A suspension is temporary. We can undo this. I didn't blink. A suspension without documented cause triggers Clause 12 in my contract. Immediate vesting. Full payout. You signed it. Helen turned to him slowly. She's correct. Dad's face tightened, not with anger, but with the sudden recognition that he had cornered himself. Madison stepped forward. Avery, come on. Just apologize. This whole thing disappears. I looked at her for exactly 1 second. It's already done. Then I placed a second folder on the table, thicker, heavier. These are the real project records, I said calmly. Timelines, change logs, resource allocations, and communication threads for every major build I've led, including the ones altered under my name. Helen opened the folder. The color drained from her face. This is extensive documentation. She paused at one page, the 3:17 a.m. email. It wasn't written by me, I said. Madison scoffed. Anyone can claim that. I took out my phone and pressed play. The room filled with sounds of the coffee shop, clattering cups, steam hissing, low chatter. Then Madison's voice cut through it all, clear, confident, careless. My sister is terrible with deadlines. I just smooth things over. Dad would never believe Avery over me. Her laugh echoed off the glass walls. Madison's face drained white. Dad turned slowly toward her, something breaking behind his eyes. You said that, he whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I closed my portfolio and gathered it under my arm. You blindsided us, Dad said softly, pain tangled in his voice. I met his eyes. No. I showed you what you chose not to see. A long, suffocating silence filled the room, full of truths they couldn't hide anymore. Then I said the only thing that mattered. I already left. I walked to the door. Behind me, Madison's voice cracked into a whisper. Dad, do something. But he didn't. He couldn't. The glass door closed behind me with a soft click. That sound, quiet, simple, felt louder than every lie they'd ever told. The moment the conference room door clicked shut behind me, the hallway felt strangely hollow, like the entire floor had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. People moved aside as I walked, eyes averted, whispers dying the second I came near. Not out of judgment, out of fear. Truth has that effect when it finally enters the room. The elevator doors closed around me, their mirrored surface catching my reflection. I expected to look shaken. Instead, I looked steady, almost calm. Like I'd stepped out of a burning building and discovered the air outside was cleaner. Outside, the morning was colder than usual, but for the first time in years it didn't bite. It cleared me. Woke me. The city noise, car horns, distant traffic, footsteps on pavement felt grounding, not overwhelming. At home, Cooper ran to me, instantly, tail wagging so hard his whole body wiggled. That kind of love, the kind you don't earn by performing, was something I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. I set the portfolio on the table, opened it. The documents lay inside in perfect order, the real timelines, the forged approvals, the email headers, the hidden folder logs. Receipts. More than enough to expose the truth if ReedTech tried to rewrite the story again. I didn't need them for myself anymore, but I knew they'd need them, soon. That night, I didn't replay the meeting. I didn't draft explanations. I didn't doubt anything I'd said. The silence in my apartment felt different, not heavy, clean. The next morning, Nina the recruiter texted, Horizon Labs wants to meet you today. You free? Yes. Their office was everything ReedTech wasn't. Sunlight, warm wood, people speaking without checking who might be listening. No tension lurking in corners. No whispered blame. During the interview, no one asked about my family. They asked about what I built, what I led, what I envisioned. For the first time, my work wasn't measured against someone else's spotlight. When I got home, a single email waited in my inbox. From ReedTech administration, subject immediate action required. I hovered over it. 1 second, 2, then I deleted it without opening it. They thought losing them would shatter me. They thought leaving was the punishment, but they never understood what my mother meant when she said, keep the receipts. She didn't mean keep evidence. She meant keep truth. And the truth was the one thing they could never control. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hear me clearly, you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. Some people love the version of you that keeps things quiet, keeps the peace, keeps carrying what was never yours to hold. But you're allowed to walk away from that weight. You're allowed to choose yourself. And if any part of my story felt like a mirror, hit subscribe. Because this story isn't over. And neither is yours.